Hey guys, it's Sam, and for today's video I'm going to be taking on the tracing challenge, and if you don't know what that is, that's okay, I kind of just made it up, though if it exists in some other form elsewhere, then I apologize. I didn't know about it, I was just making up a thing. So a few of you guys have been asking for a follow-up video from my tracing video, just asking for more details and information about how to go about tracing something to learn, and if you haven't seen my original tracing video in which I talk about some of the benefits and maybe why you'd want to trace, I'll put a link to that in the description. If you have already seen it and it was a while ago, maybe you forgot, you can go watch it again, and you can just watch it again in general because ad revenue. I'm going to explain this challenge as I go, but for the TLDR, I'm essentially taking something that I have little to no idea how to draw it from memory, trace a whole bunch of photographs of it, and then redraw it again from memory and compare, the before and the after. Is there a difference? How big is the difference? What did I learn? And that's it. That's the video. All right, so let's get this started by drawing from memory horses. Okay, so this didn't turn out as bad as I was expecting, especially this bottom 3/4 shot here. I honestly don't remember what the back legs of horses look like. Do they have back legs? So this part is done from memory. Now I'm gonna go ahead and hide this layer, trace a whole bunch of photographs, and I will see you guys again soon. I guess just to clear things up from the start, there is a reason I chose horses versus anything else to trace from, and that was because I'm really unfamiliar with horses and animals in general, and I didn't want to pick something that I was a little bit more familiar with, such as the human figure, because I didn't know if any differences would be as drastic. So I wanted to try something that I had little to no knowledge of and then see like bigger changes from the before and the after. And so I went with horses because. So I had a few rules with this challenge, and if you decide to take on this challenge yourself, which you're more than welcome to, you can change the rules, you can do whatever, I don't care. But essentially what I set for myself was, one, I could only trace, so I couldn't copy or reference or do any other forms of study. It had to be strictly tracing. There had to be a photograph and then me drawing on top of it. However I did that, it didn't matter as long as I was doing it on top of the photo reference. Rule number 2, I could only use photo references that were from life, nothing else. So I wanted to get a good grasp on the actual real anatomy of the horse, not something stylized, so I avoided any artworks or photo manipulated images. Well, to the best of my ability. Sometimes they're a little tricky to tell what is and what isn't photo manipulated. Rule number 3, I could not use any tutorials or other outside references that could be used for assistance. I could only use these photos. I didn't want to be biased for other people's methods on how to draw horses and then also trace, because I have a very limited experience with tracing, and especially for study, my experience is very small. So I wanted to try and see what a first experience would feel like without any sort of outside influence. And a sort of caveat with this being a YouTube video and just for the general public, I wanted to be as absolutely legally safe as possible, and I'm not sponsored, but I did use Pixabay for my photo references, and that's because they are CC0 licensed, and if you don't know what that is, I highly recommend you check out both my Creative Commons license video and my public domain video, which talk all about licensing and how to legally use resources without getting in trouble. Of course, if you're doing this privately on your own, then it doesn't matter, but because I wanted to do this as a YouTube video, I mean, I know there's fair use and we can argue that all day, but I didn't want to mess with it, and I really like Pixabay. It's really nice and organized and everything, so That's what I did. I used Pixabay. Y'all can deal. And just another quick mention, because I know people are going to get on my butt about it, but I did not use any images involving the musculature or the skeleton of the horse. And if you are doing this on your own as your own challenge, highly, 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 highly recommend, couldn't recommend enough, doing additional tracings of, if you're like doing a figure, an animal, the skeleton and the musculature of the animal or person you're doing. I'll get to why in a little bit later, but just to kind of cover what I'm doing right now, I wanted to try to really understand what I was drawing. So when you're practicing referencing or when you're tracing, like any sort of method of study, you really want to be active in your studies. You don't want to just be, oh, I'm just copying what I see, or oh, I'm just tracing and I just have to follow this line. It doesn't matter. And it does matter. You want to be an active learner, an active participant. You want to not just blindly copy something or blindly trace something without thinking about it. Because especially if you want, I mean, if you're just tracing just to have fun and trace or whatever, it doesn't matter. But if you want to do more things from imagination, especially, or things from memory, then being an active learner is very vital to increasing your knowledge and skill in the subject. So one way to be active is just to constantly be asking yourself questions. Why does this look the way it does? What's happening underneath? What shapes can I break this down into? And what would happen if I used different shapes? What would this look like from a different angle? Like, you just want to keep constantly asking questions in your mind as you're doing this. So that's what I was trying to do with tracing these images. And you'll notice I traced a whole bunch of different images in quite a few different ways, and that's on purpose. This was mostly unplanned. I pretty much traced in different ways depending on how I felt and what I needed and just what I wanted to try experimenting with. Because hey, I'm still like a student learner sort of thing, just like everybody else. So I'm just kind of playing around, getting a feel for it, and just seeing what works for me and what doesn't. So I tried contour lines, which is just kind of like a loose outline, basic shapes, so breaking things down from a complex form into simple shapes. And I have a tutorial on that in my Fundamentals of Art series, and I'll put a link in the description to that. Definitely check that out if you're having trouble with complex forms. And then I also did lining the forms, like marking where there are curves or just trying to analyze the shapes a bit more. I did silhouettes and then more detailed outlines, and then maybe some other things I can't really remember off the top of my head, but those were essentially the basic ones that I did, just contours, basic shapes, silhouettes, and then detailed outlines. Now each one of these kind of served a different purpose for me, and I tried to have them all kind of interconnect together. The point was to sort of break down the complex form of a horse into some more simple and basic, something easier to digest and understand, and then I can take all that, and then when I did the more detailed tracing, I can build that back up into a more complex form. So when I do it from memory later, it's just more like ingrained into me, like, oh, I can see this process of the breaking down and then rebuilding of this form. So finding patterns, finding consistencies, finding inconsistencies, finding things like that are really important. So that's what I tried to do when I was doing my various tracings. What were ways that I could make all of these different images combine into one thing, this one horse? So when I redraw it later, I'm like, oh, I don't know how to do what is a horse? It's like, oh no, it's actually this, this, and this. So as you can see, I used quite a variety of different images because I wanted to have a wide range of things to learn from. Again, I'm taking this complex form from different angles and from different perspectives, and I'm trying to like put it all into like this 3D thing into my head. In terms of like why I chose which method, which thing, it was pretty much all just intuition. It's kind of a difficult thing to explain. It's pretty much what I felt I needed at the time to help me understand it. So breaking things down into simple shapes obviously helps simplify things, make things more easy to understand. And it's like I can remember like it being more of a piece of a puzzle instead of like, okay, the nose goes straight down like this and then there's this little bump and it's like, no, it's just a box kind of thing. I was being pretty loose with my brushstrokes. I wasn't being like super accurate, like, oh my God, this line is slightly off, that ruins the whole thing. No, like this whole thing was about sketching and the accuracy of my sketch in terms of like the more looser ones. Like when I did the more detailed ones, then I kind of cared for a bit more accuracy, but for the looser ones with just the shapes and the silhouettes, the accuracy wasn't so important as was the deep analyzation of the thing you're drawing, which I cannot emphasize enough. Whether or not you're tracing, if you're just copying from a reference photo and you have like the reference photo in front of you and you're just drawing in your sketchbook at the side, like same exact thing. You want to be questioning, you want to be really thinking about what you're drawing. And for the muscles and skeletons, the reason I didn't do that with this was because Pixabay didn't actually have those pictures available. Unfortunately, their library isn't the largest. They had more than plenty horse images, but they just didn't have a lot of anatomy-based references to use. But if I were doing this privately, I would use other resources to get that more anatomy stuff down with the muscles and the skeleton. And the reason you want to do that, and this is again regardless of what you're doing, if you're tracing or if you're not, you really want to understand the underlying forms and the things that create that outer layer. Like when you're looking at a person, you're not just looking at a person, you're looking at a whole set of things that create that person. Each underlying form affects the outside layer. So what you see on the surface is affected by the muscles underneath, which are affected by the skeleton underneath that. So it's important to understand these layers and how they build on top of each other and their relationship with each other. And then you understand the forms so much better and your art is so much better. So if you're doing this challenge on your own and you're doing some anatomy-based thing, I really recommend including muscles and skeleton on top of just the photo references that you would use. All right, so the time finally came to redraw these horses from memory. In total, I'd used just under 30 images if I counted correctly, tracing them anywhere between 1 and 4 times, maybe like a little bit more, but then I would just delete the layer because I wasn't like how it was turning out. So just about 30 images, probably an average of like 2.5 tracing per image, and these were the results. I was both like surprised and then not surprised. And though before y'all start saying anything, I know the anatomy is still like not perfect. Like there's still quite a few things wrong. But if you were to compare it to the before picture, there is definitely at least a little bit of a difference. So just from tracing these photos, this has definitely increased my skill and understanding of horses. And this gave me a really great start for these foundations of this animal. And if I wanted to continue like with tracing or referencing or any other like methods of study, I could definitely do that. I definitely have a good base to go off of and really explore things further if I wanted to. This would probably be a good time to check out tutorials and have your questions and then see what sort of answers other people have come up with. Try out those tutorials and maybe try out different methods or keep going with tracing and just explore. This is like a really nice groundwork for continuing in your studies. So when you're tracing or just doing any sort of studies, the important thing is to pay attention, ask questions, experiment, and try to deeply ingrain these understandings. Tracing is most definitely an excellent and completely valid tool to help increase your knowledge about any subject, and I highly encourage you try it no matter your skill level. Be it something you're familiar with, maybe you really like drawing dogs, so you're really familiar with dogs, try tracing dogs and just see what happens. Or if you've never drawn a dog before in your life, try tracing dogs and see where it goes. Try this sort of tracing challenge yourself. And if you do try it out, let me know. I would love to see what you guys do with this. And that was the tracing challenge, so hopefully you found it interesting or entertaining, and I really, really, really highly suggest you guys try it out yourself. It doesn't have to be horses. Again, that was just something that I'm very, very weak at. And clearly I learned quite a bit from less than 30 images, so definitely give it a shot and just see what happens. I'll have a link to Pixabay, again not sponsored, in the description, and you guys can just go and search and use images as you please. If you'd like to take on this challenge, I do recommend checking out my Creative Commons and public domain videos. I'll have them linked in the description just so you guys don't break any copyright laws. If you have any suggestions for future challenges you'd like to see me do, let me know in the comments down below, and if you decide to take on this challenge yourself, let me know what you will be tracing. And of course, if you'd like to help support me in this channel, you can find links to my Patreon and Ko-Fi Coffee page linked in the description down below. And you can also like, share, and subscribe. It all really helps me out. So thanks so much for watching, guys. Bye!